Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, it's my 100th album review. Thanks a lot for all of your support. I never could have gotten here without you. But right now, let's get to the meat of the matter. Talking about an album from B.o.B, titled Underground Luxury. Now, one of my first album reviews I ever wrote for my blog was for the sophomore album Strange Clouds by B.o.B. And I've always had a bit of a fondness for the guy. I've liked his inventive production that blends southern hip-hop trends with offbeat folk and futuristic beats, his flair for bombast and killer pop hooks that are striking and memorable, and his flow and wordplay calling back to Andre 3000 of Outkast, one of my favorite rappers of all time, and his lyrical dexterity and that constructing an intricate and compelling song. That last album, Strange Clouds, had a loose thematic progression exploring isolation and coming to grips with success. And while I'd argue the record was shaky, inconsistent, and frequently undermined by a selection of guest stars who had no idea of the album's theme or what the hell they were doing in most cases, the album ultimately managed to stick the landing with the career-defining thesis statement of "Where Are You? B.o.B versus Bobby Ray." That song remains a big favorite of mine to this day for the superb piano hook that really bellied the melody of the song, and in fact that proved that B.o.B was his own harshest critic, at least on that album. And thus, I've always tried to keep my eye out for B.o.B throughout this year, especially when I heard that he was going to be releasing a new album. Fortunately, it wasn't all that difficult because he had a hit lurking in the lower half of the Billboard Hot 100 throughout most of this year. Unfortunately, that song was titled Headband, featuring 2 Chainz, which was really only notable for a listless and minimalist presentation in a year where most mainstream rap was listless and minimalist and not very good, where 2 Chainz delivered a bunch of punchlines that I could have swore he's delivered earlier on other albums this year, and B.o.B delivered 2 of the laziest performances and raps that I had heard in a long time. It was a disconcerting sign of things to come, especially off his new album, and thus I wasn't really looking forward to this record as much as I wanted to be, which the label had decided to dump in the dumping ground of mid-December. Now granted, B.o.B has always been a good rapper and a good producer, but was the energy or the intellect or the insight going to survive the transition on a record that he called his most effortless to create? No, they didn't, and it's been a while since I've been this disappointed by an artist that I really do like. I'll say this, Underground Luxury by B.o.B isn't dreadful, but it's definitely mediocre and at several points steps into bad, and it's a big step down from his previous albums. Worse still, it's a record that plainly shows that B.o.B just isn't trying in the same way anymore. He calls this album effortless. Yeah, sure. What effort was made into making this album? And considering that I used to really like this guy, this is a huge disappointment for me. I mean, what the hell happened here? Okay, so you know what? All right. Let's start with the instrumentation, and here's where I will pay B.o.B the solitary compliment that I will give this album as a whole. He might be one of the few mainstream rappers that I've heard so far this year to implement elements of trap instrumentation into his production where it kind of works and didn't bug me. This is mostly because B.o.B has always had a taste for classical instrumentation, a lot of pianos and keyboards and guitars, and chamber pop for his melodies, and he smartly manages to balance trap-flavored percussion with the rest of his mix. And yeah, sure, his production has always worked to sand off the slightest hints of texture and grit on any of his instruments, but it sometimes somewhat works with the more spacious, airy, melody-driven feel that has always characterized B.o.B's work at his best. Now the problem here is that while the melodies are here, they don't really build too much. There isn't a lot of that dramatic crescendo that you got off Strange Clouds with songs like Bombs Away or So Good. And the dramatic hooks, they really feel underweight and not particularly special. And that's mostly thanks to B.o.B himself, and this is where the problems on this record begin in earnest. Maybe it's just being exposed to a lot better rappers this year, but a lot of B.o.B's technical problems in his flow and delivery began cropping up in earnest on this record, and I was shocked, absolutely shocked how many sloppy rhymes and repeated phrases were just used to fill up space on the verses. It's lazy, it's amateurish, and I was disgusted to see it. When you start peeling back the poetry, furthermore, this is a shockingly underwritten album. At least the detail and insight, or at least variety, that used to characterize B.o.B's rhyming at his best, it's not here. Instead, we get track after track of the same generic generic luxury rap that I could have swore I've heard a dozen or more times this year, focused on cash, weed, and hoes. And what's worse is that it's not even interesting luxury rap. I swear, I've heard these punchlines satirized and parodied with more detail and flair by Danny Brown on an album this year. And it doesn't help matters at all when B.o.B just is not spitting with the same degree of intensity or spark. When he sounds bored on the track, why the hell should I care? Now, granted, it's not all luxury rap on this record. B.o.B does try to get political on Paper Route and talk about government surveillance into our lives and materialism with respect to culture, which on their own are topics that could support an entire song or hell, an entire album. And the problem is B.o.B only skims the surface. He mentions them, he produces the text, but there's no subtext. And then he has the song John Doe, which talks about drug and alcohol addiction and features a really great hook from Priscilla Renia. And then the momentum is just squandered by a final verse that just turns into another rap about dealing with the politics in the music industry. Nobody Told Me Then is a song that tries to go into the whole more money, more problems issue, except the fact that Danny Brown's Lonely and Eminem's So Far and a good half Hobson's most recent album touched on this with way more insight than B.o.B could bother to muster or produce. And plus it feels more than a little disingenuous for B.o.B to be complaining about wealth and more problems due to it when his opening track, All I Want, is built around the shallowest materialism in music I've seen in a long time. And the problem is that his instrumentation is so earnest and sincere, it's hard not to buy that he doesn't believe this. Same thing with John Doe. It's a little hard to take a song like that remotely seriously when your very next track is all about smoking weed. You know, that's the big issue with underground luxury. This album has no idea what it wants to be, and it's a complete mess. Now, granted, The Adventures of Bobby Ray and Strange Clouds were both messes, but at least those had some insight and some genuine earnestness that elevated some of the songs. This record, though, there are fragments of insights from the old B.o.B that I liked, but it's clear he'd rather rap about shallow partying and weed and sex and all the rest of the topics I've heard time and time again this year, and done better this year on that note. What's worse is that this album seems to be reveling in its raw, shallow debauchery, just daring critics to call him out so he can say, you know what? This is what I want to be talking about. There's nothing wrong with making party songs. And you know what? He's not wrong with that. But even I'm not even sure he buys into it. The song Coastline, which is probably my favorite track on the record, even though that's not saying much, shows more than a little insecurity about the direction of this shallow frame of mind and the direction he's taking his music. And the scary thing is that self-awareness that used to define B.o.B's best work seems to be slowly fading away, which is not a good sign. And his guest stars sure as hell aren't helping this. When you have limited personalities like 2 Chainz reinforcing this terrible and regressive mindset and perpetuating the cultural delusion that Future somehow deserves to have a career in anything related to music, you're not setting yourself up for anything close to success. Now, look, I get that B.o.B just wants to have fun and he just wants to party, and I get that shallow debauched impulse to do just that. We all have those moments. If this is his party album, okay, fine. But this album doesn't have the focus, the instrumentation doesn't have the flavor, and B.o.B doesn't sound like he has the motivation to make this album even a very good album full of party songs. While I do have a fondness for B.o.B's production, which a lot of critics don't have, even that's somewhat fading away with the sloppier rapping and his borderline cursory examination of any sort of serious subject beyond golden tits. So with that, yeah, sorry. 4 out of 10 and no recommendation. I mean, B.o.B, ain't this the dude who said it ain't about the price tag? Now on this record, all you did was brag. I mean, come on, Bob. I thought you were better than that, dog. What happened to Cloud 9 and Generation Lost? You're succumbing to a golden idol and giving up on everything, and you're losing that familiar melody. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Thanks a lot for supporting me for these past 100 video reviews. I've really appreciated all the subscribers that I've got, and you guys are you guys keep me honest. I appreciate that. If there's anything I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's anything else that you want me to cover before the end of the year, before I start doing those end of the year lists, I'd be more than happy to take a listen. Until then, see you next time.